This week on the Eldritch Lorecast, we get to actually break some news with Spelljammer Academy coming free to D&D Beyond, and we congratulate James on his nomination for the ENNIE Awards as part of the Tal'Dorei Reborn campaign setting. All that and more right now. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 D&D podcast in all the planes of existence, including out in space, where you might be spelljamming or sailing upon the ethereal sea. My name is Ben Byrne, and I am here, as always, with James Haeck, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and this week we're starting with Scott's much delayed question. I apologize, Scott. Your question, which I will bring to the panel right now, is how to communicate information to players, exposition to players as the game master without it being boring, without it being extraneous, without it feeling extraneous. Shawn, what is your method? Even if it is like key information, but you've got a maybe slightly complicated plot, how do you go about trying to communicate this to the players?
Depends on the group that I'm playing with. I love to just vary it. Use as many different methods as you can to get the information to them. Handouts are great because that's something that they don't have to remember. They can glance down and see. Poems, songs, exposition from characters, exposition from the DM. Any way that isn't the same over and over and over again is great. Here's one, if I can only give one tip.
Sure.
Make it something that forces the characters to act. So rather than reading them the 5 rules, the 5 laws of this city, have them get a tablet that's missing keywords of the 5 laws of the city. And they have to go and ask NPCs, what are the 5 laws of the city? And they're actively gathering this information. They're more likely to remember it than if you just read it out to them.
Gotcha. James, if you had one tip, I mean, please give more. I'll wrap back around, Shawn. But James, if you had one tip.
I think the greatest tip about information delivery that I ever learned from playing video games is hide your tutorials. Make them seamless with the rest of the game that you're playing. This is slightly off the topic, but I think it's fairly relevant. If you need to teach someone how to climb a wall in a video game, you might put a button prompt that says press spacebar to jump, but you would also put a big splash of color on the wall they need to climb to kind of highlight the place that they need to go to, right? So they might put it together with some sort of basic kinesthetic knowledge. Oh yeah, if I jump towards the ledge I need to grab onto, I'll grab it and I'll pull myself up. So if you take that sort of invisible, unobtrusive tutorializing mindset into information delivery in RPGs, you kind of wind up with a concept of, well, the classic writing maxim is show, don't tell. Find a way to immediately demonstrate what's going on rather than just sort of saying it straight out. And that's a very long-winded sort of rambling way of saying more or less what Shawn said, which is find a way to make it actionable. Sure. don't just yammer.
Dael, what are your thoughts on getting information across to the players during your sessions?
I don't know why I thought this was going to be one of those would you rather be a dragon or a griffin questions. And then you just give us something that's really hard.
I don't know what the audience prefers. I thought like those flippant questions folks seem to just skip past. But then last week I think it was Gethin was asking in the Twitch chat, like, what was the starting question? Like I need to know. It's become a bit of trivia. Yeah.
No, so I find this really, really tricky. This is one of those things where I feel like no matter what I do, I'm boring. I think my number one approach tends to be, I write myself boxed text for any number of things, descriptions of places or whatever, but I do it for exposition as well. And I've kind of gotten into a place where I write out a bunch of boxed text for myself and then I look at it and I go, I would be bored listening to this, and I do like an editing pass and another editing pass until I've cut out any extraneous information. I'm like, this is as long as my players will pay attention to me, and make myself something that I can read out that just has the most important stuff. And if they dig for more, I've got more. I already wrote it, but yeah, try to really keep it down to
sure.
bare basics.
I mean, that gets into like, describing a room, how much detail do you go into, which also for 5e specifically, and I'm sure other games as well, but within a 5e context, gets into like how much information do you give them that allows them to still have things to discover in a room or in a situation that they can ask about, but gives them enough information to realize that those things are there. Like if you describe a room and you don't describe there's a cupboard in the room, then how do they know to ask to search the cupboard, so to speak?
Yeah. And I mean, it also brings up that, age-old question of what order do you describe things in? What stuff do you leave out so that they don't accidentally think that something is important when it's not? We don't want to focus on the chair for an hour. That sort of question I think is very relevant when it comes to exposition or lore dumping or anything like that. The lore of your world is not all going to be important at once. And when you just hand your players all of the information at once, it becomes really tricky for them to pass what is relevant to the situation, what isn't. And sometimes you can give a little extra so they have to kind of figure it out and put things together. But largely I do try to keep it to what is relevant. And also I think it's always a good idea to try and build out some of that stuff with your players. I like to do that with my clerics, talk about what kind of religion do you follow? Let's figure that out. And we figure out the story. Because I'm, again, mythology background, I'm a big believer in sort of the core story of any given religion. So I try to, smash that out with the player. Or, you can play Microscope and figure out the backstory of the world with your players as sort of a session 0 ahead of the game so that they're kind of already baked into it.
Dael, I think you've raised a really interesting point, and that this question is really a twofold question. How do you deliver big picture information, and how do you deliver small picture information? Because the act of telling people what's in a dungeon room can be quite different from telling people what the core plot conceits of your setting are. They're similar insofar as you can't dump a gigantic steak's worth of information on them. You have to parcel it out in more tender cuts than that. But sometimes
I just really like that better.
It's tough and chewy sometimes. No one's going to suffer through all of that. But I think it's very true that sometimes when you're delivering the brass tacks of a world, you don't have any other choice but to say, hey, these things are true. And since we're in a role-playing game and, role-playing is people who have lived in the secondary world all their life and they're not, sort of been imported from England like you're in Narnia or whatever, then there's just some things that you kind of got to know. And if you can keep those points short and brief and really salient, then you've succeeded. But if you ramble and put everything that you've thought of on the page rather than kind of leaving them some room to ask you questions as they want, then you've overloaded them and they'll check out.
Yeah, I think video games are actually pretty apt, not just in their sort of tutorializing, which is my approach to teaching people the game. I say, don't worry about this big textbook and we'll worry about combat when you enter your first combat, and then I'll explain how that all works. But also the way that it's almost a trope in video games, right? That your character has amnesia at the start of the game, so they have a reason not to know anything about the world in which the game takes place. But even if they don't suffer amnesia, the way the game will start small and be like, all right, this is the immediate, area. This is what you need to know about right now. And then slowly introduce more and more, and the world gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you kind of have the room and the space to go out and explore it all and learn that vital information. I am curious though, like in terms of that micro, you've just entered a room, here's the description, as well as the macro, here's some world building stuff that might be relevant to you. I watched a video recently on YouTube. I can't remember who this was from, but basically it gave me anxiety because the crux of it was like, you're boring your players if you go into long monologues. Don't monologue as a game master. You need to get your information out quick, and don't do it like they do it on the big streams, because they're designed to be entertainment. So the GM's going to monologue and do these big, poetry-like descriptions of what's in a room. And then the very next session I had, which was like 2 days later, I'm describing a room, and it's not enough for me to say there's a cupboard in the room. I need to describe that it's like a curvy sort of Beauty and the Beast style cupboard to give you an idea of what it, like the aesthetic of the room as well as what's physically in it. Dael, you have thoughts?
I just was gonna ask. I mean, it's not even a big thing, but I am curious at the idea that your players who are playing the game will be bored about this, but the viewers of an actual play will love it. Like, that's a little bat funny to me, because I don't know that that's the case.
I think it usually goes the opposite direction.
Yeah, that would be my guess. Just, on a basic sort of engagement scale. But no, I also think that it's important to acknowledge that where do you draw the line? What is a monologue? What isn't a monologue? Exposition is different from dialogue, is different from, describing a room. Is exposition, you expound on a thing, right? I think that is a necessary thing to remember. I just wouldn't be too afraid of exposition. I think usually it's probably actually fine.
And I have been set free.
It really just comes down to this. Like many other bits of D&D advice, there's no one size fits all answer. If you look at those streams, the big streams of Critical Roles and Dimension 20s and everything else is of the world, the reason why these DMs are so poetical and loquacious about their descriptions is because they and their players like it. That's the dynamic at the table they like. And yeah, it does serve the medium a little bit to be a bit performative about it all. If you're playing with a group of people that really likes that sort of verbose, poetic style, then you have carte blanche to run wild with it. And just pay attention to the emotions of your players. Don't just get all self-conscious and anxious, like I'm prone to do, about, oh God, do they like it? Do they not? Just sort of observe them. Focus on them. Focus not on you. And if they're a beer and pretzels group that just wanted to kick down the door and to kill some rust monsters, then don't sweat it. They didn't care about that stuff.
Yeah, that's
anyway.
exactly it. And that's, to express a quick frustration with
We've just looped back around to what Shawn said at the start as well. It's like, well,
yeah, I mean, Shawn just has to say it once, and we're all like, yeah, okay, fair enough.
We got to find it ourselves.
He's been there. He knows.
Think it through.
Shawn's very wise. He says in 10 words, but it takes us 10,000.
It's an hour-long show, so we need to stretch it out a bit. That's okay.
Yeah, fair. No, but I think that YouTube, D&D YouTubers that I tend to enjoy, like yourself, like Colville, tend to be folks that not only my opinions tend to align with, and I think, oh, that's interesting, or that's how I like to run the game, so I agree with that, and this person has more to offer me that I personally find interesting. It's like a video game reviewer. You need to find video game reviewers that like the games you like, not just any video game reviewer and assume that they know what's good and what's not. But Shawn, if you had to give a second, I said I'd wrap back around. If you had to give a second tip for exposition or doling out information.
James brought up a great point about fiction writing or writing in general, which is show, don't tell, which is actually for beginning writers is great advice. For more advanced writers, it's the worst advice because it's not show, don't tell. It's tell when you need to tell and show when you need to show. And don't do both unless it's a point that you really have to reemphasize. And I think that fits for role-playing games as well as it does for fiction. What I try to do if I have to get something across to the players is make them ask me what their character knows, because you are making them want to know. So rather than saying there are 3 thieves guilds in this city, guild A, B, and C, and then you go and describe what they mean, have a character, an NPC, walk up and say, which guild do you prefer, A, B, or C? And the player freaks out. Now, a player might run with it and just start talking, or they may say, oh, Mr. Game Master, what do I know about guilds A, B, and C? As soon as you get them asking for information, they are more likely to pay attention to that information.
Gotcha.
So try to find ways to get them to want to know, whether it's through role-playing, whether it's through combat, whether if you say something in the shadows in this combat is gleaming, but you don't describe it, they're going to say, what else do I see in the room? They're asking for you then to give them that information.
Creating an awareness of an information deficit, right? This is a tactic for, I'm sure I've talked about this before. It's a tactic for clickbait. Essentially is that it all it does is it makes you aware that you don't know what's in the video. So it doesn't matter if it says 10 things you missed in, I don't know, Spider-Man Homecoming. Either someone will think, oh, what did I miss? What don't I know? And they'll want to click on the video. Or someone will think, I didn't miss anything. I caught every single Easter egg, but they don't know what's in the video. So they have to watch the video in order to find out if they're right. It's just very clever. It's just making players go, I don't know this thing. How can I find out? It's this sort of curiosity drive that you can access. It reminds me as well, just as a branch off the exposition thing, I think that if you can find moments in a story, in a fantasy sort of trajectory that people expect a bit of exposition, those are great moments to drop it on them. I think that, it's kind of hard to nail because I think, this kind of descriptive language is difficult for a lot of people, but travel, right? When you are describing travel, we've all got in our heads the sort of, reeling helicopter shots of Middle Earth, but we can't exactly do that. So we have to rely on words. So you are describing the passage of time, the change in geography. And I think that that's a great time to, for example, drop in world lore. If you look at Greek mythology, if you look at Lord of the Rings, there are these stories that are tied in with the land as you go. You can go, these are the statues of the old kings. You can say that is the mountain where the Titans made their base during the war with the gods. And as you pass by, you can just kind of drop these little bits and bobs into your players' memory banks. And they're already kind of primed for just getting a bunch of just the monologue, the DM monologue.
Yeah. I think that is honestly one of the most unique and different pieces of advice that I've heard for travel, because I've heard, get the players to describe what they see, which I think is good because it gives them engagement. But sometimes you also get a group that are like, oh, I don't know, you tell me, aren't you the GM? Or like, run a simple encounter or run some sort of exploration encounter or something like that. But letting the land through which they're traveling in tell the story to them a little bit, I think is a great way to create engagement, pass out information, make travel feel like they're traveling, but not have it be this, arduous part of the game that they just want to get to the next sort of bit of the game. So I really like that because it makes me think of Lord of the Rings, when the hobbits are creating a campfire and you can see the trolls from the Hobbit in the background. And it's like, well, these trolls were when Bilbo passed through here previously. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. And it gives them a greater connection to the story. You can even ask your players, go like, hey, what do you think you would see that, your character connects to about the world?
I think that also latches on to another sort of player type dichotomy. There are players who love to get their hands dirty when it comes to the world building, and there are players that like to be entertained by the DM as well. And it takes some intuition on the DM's part to recognize who you can go, tell me about this place, and who you engage by saying, and this is the thing about this place.
Scott, I hope we have answered your question thoroughly in the opening parts of this episode. A lot of what was said actually will wrap back around into some questions that we got emailed in. podcast@ghostfiregaming.com if you want to ask us a question. But before we get to those, we have the news of the week. And we actually have...
The news of the week.
I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe we have some news that... is fresh off the press, I hope, or at least we won't be a week late on this. Spelljammer Academy is a free update that has gone out to D&D Beyond. Just having a D&D Beyond account gets you it. It is 4 adventures. The first adventure is currently accessible, and if you go and claim it on D&D Beyond, you'll automatically get the following 3 as they release. I hope I get those details correct because I'm literally just reading this on D&D Beyond now. Thank you to the Ghostfire Gaming Discord for sharing a link to this right before I was about to record. How are we feeling about this? Shawn, are you excited to spell jam?
I am. I'm more excited about Will Doyle, who is doing the writing on at least the first adventure and probably more of them. Will, who has worked on most of the Wizards of the Coast books in the last 3 years. He and his partner, Stacey Allen, are incredible artists, cartographers, adventure writers. And this, from what I scanned it earlier today, and it seems like a really nice way to introduce Spelljammer as a setting, as a play style, while doing it in a very short, concise adventure.
I've only just been able to glance at it. I started reading the introduction, the adventure background, and it seems to be oriented around Spelljammer Academy, which is like learning how to adventure in space, adventure in the Spelljammer setting. Have you had a greater look at the adventure? Can you tell us a little bit what it's about? Like just that first one?
I haven't read it cover to cover. There are 3 sections, and I'm going from memory here, so stand back. When you think Spelljammer Academy, some might think Starfleet Academy. So the first thing that you do is do a simulation of a battle, and you are sort of tested on or graded on how you do. Then you get to get a sense of the setting itself, the academy, which is located in an island just off of Chult, I believe. So you get to see that, and then you get to go on your first mission. I'm not going to go into too many spoilers on that one. So it's a very step-by-step learn how to interact with this world and play the game that is being presented to you.
And because it's a Will Doyle adventure, there's a very cool map that accompanies it. Spelljammer Academy is this cool rock spire in the middle of the sea, and it gets a very cool illustrative map that Will Doyle and his partner Stacey Allen are just the best in the biz at creating. Blown away by their maps every single damn time.
Yeah, I just clicked on it and had a look. This thing looks amazing. It's like this big multi-tiered map, which is exactly what you said. Dael, you excited to go to space jam?
Of course I am excited to go to space. I am ready for this. I was born ready for this. But also, I know that we've been talking about it a lot in recent episodes, but D&D Beyond just keeps giving. It's just clever business. Yeah. It's clever business. Like to now hit us with an adventure for the next setting. That's just I'm watching and going.
And hey, I've been looking at Wizards of the Coast's careers page. D&D Beyond's hiring. Like they're ramping up their machine. I think it's very clear that this is a sign of good and bigger and better things to come from them.
I agree. Yeah, it's sort of slightly cynical as I've played it the last couple of weeks around this conversation, and there's been conversations in the Ghostfire Gaming Discord around that push and pull that we've talked about in the past between like, should physical books come with a PDF key or a key for D&D Beyond or something like that? And what is it fair to ask consumers to pay twice for a book or 1.5 times for a book, get a discount on a digital blah, 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 blah. And that discussion is certainly interesting, but the fact that they're just continuously keeping up this stream of constant content that is just free to anybody who has access to D&D Beyond is honestly pretty impressive, to the point where I'm like, yeah, they probably, I'd be happy to buy a book twice if I'm also getting this free content as a constant kind of add-on to my engagement
To be
with the
fair,
platform.
cynicism in the face of capitalism is always good.
Yes,
True.
yes. I think it's very wise that we're approaching any big business entity with caution. But we should give them credits when they have a win. When they take the W, that's when we go for it.
When you're critical of a thing, it means that you're just watching them. You're just watching them. You know what I mean? It means that I can look at them and go, that's a good thing that I get in exchange for participating in capitalism. As well as going, that's a bad thing that happens in exchange for my participation in capitalism.
It's never a good idea to take the free donut and then complain about the hole in it. So you should just take what's given to you and absolutely be cynical about it, but be cynical about everything in life, right? Always look at things with an eye toward what's really going on here. It's the only way to live, not just capitalism, any ism.
Isms, in my opinion, are not good, as a wise man once.
You just got to recognize the good when you're recognizing the bad also. And today it looks like there's some great good coming out of D&D Beyond right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, make no mistake, there is a pre-order for the Spelljammer book, right at the top of the adventure page. But that's not a bad thing. That's like, hey, we've released this product, for free, check it out. And, because you enjoy this, or if you enjoy this, you might also enjoy this book that we've got coming out where you can make your own adventures in Spelljammer.
I'm not going to turn down a free sample at the supermarket.
No, who does? Some people, I'm sure. Anyway.
Vegans.
Now, we can't blame everything on the vegans.
We can try, James.
Wow!
I'm joking.
You've offended all the vegans in our audience.
I'm sorry.
The Eldritch Lorecast supports vegans. May or may not be vegan.
But not veganism. Because a man should not veganism.
That is fair. I am so lost, I have no idea where to go from here. But...
Space.
Let's go to space.
To infinity and beyond.
Speaking of isms, no, that's not going to work, but it doesn't matter because I'm just going to bowl ahead and say that the ENNIE nominations, the ENNIE Award nominations are the sort of industry awards or for the tabletop RPG industry, or the ENNIE magazine websites industry awards. For the tabletop RPG industry have been announced. And James Haeck, officially ENNIE nominated writer for the Tal'Dorei Reborn campaign setting for best setting. Ooh. How are you feeling this morning, good sir? This evening, I suppose.
Overjoyed, overwhelmed, and surprised. I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't get an email ahead of time. Tal'Dorei Reborn is a really, really, really good book. A lot of hard work went into it over a very short amount of time, both by me and my co-authors and our producer and our editors and all of the artists. And I mean, that book is a complete package. And I'm really, really glad, not just for my own benefit, not just for my own sort of ego stroking, but because everyone who worked on that book deserves a huge, huge round of applause for what they did. It's gorgeous. And personally, I'm just really glad that I was able to go back to the book that Matt Mercer and I made in 2017 and tinker with it. That we had the option, the freedom to go back and double its page count for a new and revised edition. It's fantastic. And should I say, in addition to the Tal'Dorei nomination, some of our writers for Fables have been nominated, not for their Fables work, it's too new, but for Goddesses Unchained, or
Uncaged Goddesses.
Uncaged, thank you. Uncaged, Goddesses. Great book, equally deserving of all of that, and having worked or currently working with some of those writers, that nomination is very, very, very well deserved as well.
I should go and I've been aware of the Uncaged series for a little while now because it's like an anthology series. A friend of mine in Melbourne worked on the first one, which kind of put it on my radar. It just seems really cool. I'm really glad to see that that's continuing, that that's succeeding, and I should check it out at some point. The artwork on it is just incredible as well, the cover art, which I'm glad that you brought that up, because Uncaged Goddesses is like the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King of the Ennies this year, with nominations for cover art, best interior art, product of the year, and best adventure, I think is the 4 that they're nominated for. Just quickly wrapping back around to Tal'Dorei Reborn, because I think we've talked about it before on the podcast. But what was something that you were really pleased to go back and get the opportunity to change in that book when you went back and you were like, oh yeah, this bit needs to change?
Well, there's a lot of little things. Like I've improved a lot as a writer over those 5 years, and so a lot of little tinkerings. But the thing that I was really pleased to go back and tackle is how we handled some of the races in that book. Tal'Dorei is a very classic fantasy setting. It was born out of that soup of Tolkien, but also World of Warcraft, and also like 3rd edition D&D, and everything that gives you the idea this is classic high fantasy. And over the past 5 years, there's been something of a reevaluation of how we treat races in fantasy, and Shawn has firsthand knowledge of that, having done a lot of tinkering with the way that D&D does races in Aurora, our new campaign setting, and we didn't reinvent the wheel into a new and better wheel like Aurora did, but we definitely took the way that we presented a lot of the races in Tal'Dorei, particularly things like Drow and Orcs, the usual suspects, but also highly racialized factions. This is the number one thing that gets my goat in classic fantasy, is highly racialized factions or racial enclaves, because even in real world history, like if you look back at the Roman Empire, for example, it is not racially or ethnically monolithic, even among human beings. It's vast. It was nearly continent spanning, and people traveled a lot, even in the ancient world. And so having a group of this is one that stands large in my mind. There's a group of bandits on the dividing plains called the Ravagers. And we initially made them basically, okay, they're all gnolls, orcs, and goblins, and they're all evil, and they're all bloodthirsty, and they're horrible, but it's just because they're, gnolls and orcs and goblins, and me and Matt and everyone else working on that book kind of looked at them, it's like, this isn't going to fly. It not only it's not going to fly, it's just not good. It's very lazy writing. And so having the opportunity to go back and reassess kind of the, how shall I say it, our baseline assumptions about how fantasy works, how classic fantasy works, was a really huge opportunity. And I'm really glad that we were able to do it.
I've glanced to the ENNIE list. I'm not familiar with every work on there, so I just thought I'd open it to the forum. Is there any other nominations people are excited for? Congratulations. I mean, obviously to the whole swath of nominees. Any other thoughts?
I've only had a glance, and we've already talked about it, but I mean, the Uncaged anthology products, that whole series it caught my eye immediately when the first one was coming out, because of course I am a gigantic mythology nerd, and I will forever regret that I was just too busy at the time to submit for it. But I just think it's a really, really cool project, and I've been so stoked to see its success.
Yeah, me too. It
Uncaged,
really
I think, has really grown out of its original sort of DM's Guild anthology roots. It's like it's remained there, but the quality and polish and professionalism has just exploded. I loved even the original Uncaged, but it had the feel of a DM's Guild anthology, which is a perfectly great thing. But this new book, and you can tell because of all the awards it's getting nominated for, has an incredibly professional, top quality feel to it. And I'm just really proud of everyone. Honestly, they've come a long way. They started off good, and they've become great. They really have.
Well, that's, my question around the Uncaged anthology in particular is, did it start with a company, not dissimilar to Ghostfire Gaming or Kobold Press or any of these kind of third party? Did it start with a company, or was it just sort of a cooperation between several artists first and it grew into something? Like, how did that evolve, I suppose? Because I just don't know. Like, I'm completely ignorant to it.
I did a review of the original anthology for Dragon Plus magazine. And I believe Ashley Warren was the editor or the producer of the first one and of some of them since. So no, it was, hey, let's get some new voices and let's see if we can, as James said, take some of these classic stories and let's break them. Let's turn them on their ear and let's see if we can tell some new stories with them. So, hats off to Ashley for that and for everything that's come of it and all the new voices that we've heard because of it.
It's very much a realization of the sort of the DM's Guild dream of getting a lot of disparate creators together and without a centralized company backing them, do a massive collaborative artistic work that becomes sort of a genre unto itself.
Congratulations to everybody, including James, the Uncaged Goddesses, James for Taldore Reborn, the Uncaged Goddesses for all their nominations and everybody else nominated for the Ennies this year. We will undoubtedly wrap back around when the winners are announced. What is the time frame of this? Like, when are the Ennies winners announced after the nominations? This is like my first...
Gee, no idea.
Gen Con. Okay, cool. This is my first kind of year inside the industry, so to speak, watching this all unfold. Speaking of watching things unfold, all right, I am so excited. This is another breakfast, D&D breakfast set thing that I just threw in the news because it got me super excited. Dante and I were meant to be doing something yesterday and I was frantically typing away on my computer and then this completely distracted the both of us. So God of War Ragnarok, the new God of War video game. If you've played God of War, the previous one, God of 4, if you will, was the previous one. I never played any of the previous ones on PS3. Started on PS4. God of War, it's an amazing game. It's the best Thor simulator you're ever going to play. It has the new game Ragnarok coming out later this year with a collector's edition. The reason this is in any way relevant to this podcast is for one reason, which is that Dante noticed yesterday there's the collector's edition and the Jotnar edition. Both come with a set of tabletop RPG dice, which we just thought was very peculiar, and whether there's some kind of tie-in there. Whether like Sony or I can't think of who the studio behind that game is, but whether they're planning like a tabletop RPG based on the God of War series. It just jumped out to us. Santa Monica, thank you, Dante.
Are dice the new coins? Special edition filler?
Dice the new coins?
Well, has tabletop RPG role-playing become that ubiquitous that, like, separate from anything, the game company is just like, people like dice. People like tabletop RPGs.
These gaming nerds will like dice.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, the other thing is that it also, comes with a big Thor's hammer as well, but that's not as exciting as the dice.
A big Thor's hammer.
A big Thor's hammer. A big, authentic Thor's hammer, I would like to think. Look, I'll be honest.
Just a Thor's hammer.
I'll be honest, Dael, I wanted you to pronounce Mjolnir before I did, just to be safe.
Well, technically, I am saying it wrong. Technically, it's more like Mjolnir, but, I am not.
I won't hold it against you.
Dramatic. I have never played a God of War game.
Oh, wow.
In my early days on YouTube, when I was all mythology all the time, well, that's not quite true, but let's go with it. I got a lot of requests to do videos about the God of War. He is a real the character. What's his name?
Kratos.
Kratos. Thank you so much. Kratos is kind of technically a real character in Greek mythology, but he shows up literally like once as one of the beings that comes to take Prometheus away to strap him to the rock for the eagle feasting. So it was one of those things where everyone was like, do God of War. And I'm like, there's nothing for me to give you. Similar. Do Xena. She's not real. I don't know. I can't. So yeah, that's probably the extent of my experience with God of War. I'm very sad to say, but everyone around me seems to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'd be interested in how the presentation of the mythology, especially in God of War 4, which God of 4, 4 of War, presents like amalgamating Greek mythology and Norse mythology a little bit. I think it's more about the character relationships in the context of the game than it is about like mythology and like representing the mythology in an authentic way. So I think you'd either get really excited or be really mad. It could go either way. James, have you dabbled at all?
No, I actually haven't. I was very much a sort of mythology snob when the original God of Wars were coming out, and I was like, "Oh, Greek mythology."
Oh, yeah, like internet people,
yeah, and so I kind of missed the boat for the like God of War nostalgia, and I already have The Witcher to satisfy my gruff video game father fantasies.
Wasn't me.
So I don't need Kratos to be like boy at me when I can have Geralt and Ciri have their family dynamic instead.
That is true. The daddening of video games, that was like peak daddening, that God of War game. I think it was it was a character study first. I think Kratos evolved to be more than just a gruff, angry man, but he is a gruff, angry man. I'm not gonna deny. Shawn, help me out here. Come on. Surely you have delved into the depths of the mythology as presented in God of War.
I get to play about one video game every 3 years, and right now it's Witcher 3. I got to say it too.
Yes.
Witcher 1.
Yes. So,
how are you finding The Witcher 3? Now I must know that.
I'm enjoying it. I wouldn't rush out to play a Witcher 3 role-playing game or a God of War role-playing game or any role-playing game based on a popular video game, because I think we've already seen that. I'm not worried that Sony is going to come out with the competitor for D&D or anything like that.
They were to do a God of War role-playing game, based on the one clue that there are dice included in the collector's edition. I'd be interested, but I would have to be convinced, I think, by a friend who comes and says, let's play this. And I'd be like, okay.
On the subject of the D&D breakfast stuff, I have not stopped thinking about it. I brought it up at a family gathering on the weekend. I can't believe... why does the bowl have a handle if it's a breakfast set? You're not eating soup.
Drink the cereal
breakfast.
Milk, Dael.
Yeah, at the end. That's what you've got to do. Obviously. I'm so glad though. That's what this podcast is for, is to promote
Use your
conversation.
Hands to drink the milk.
Just
pour it in.
just
Drink it like Beast from Beauty and the Beast.
If you're not getting your hands dirty, are you really eating cereal? That's Dael's question.
As my family used to say, anything is finger food if you have the time.
But speaking of finger food, Andy's question, I just have to quickly read this. Yes, all right. Speaking of finger food, delectable finger food. Andy has a delectable question. There we go. Asking about favorite questions to ask players to help them flesh out their characters during character creation or session zeros. The best way to unlock the character, make them feel like they're hooked into the world. I think we've talked a little bit about this before. I know, Shawn, you've said in the past to try to stick to open-ended questions that the players can kind of fill in the blanks a little bit. But do any of you have a specific favorite set of questions, or like almost like a character sheet for the character sheet, or a character sheet for the role player, the character sheet. Anyway, I've dabbled on along. Go.
First date questions. No joke. First date questions. Think about things that
April 25th, because it's not too hot and it's not too cold.
Leo.
Think about. No, not bad first date questions. Good first date questions.
Walks on the beach.
I'm thinking, like, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live? If you could change anything about the world, what would you change? If you could, what are the top 3 things that you want other people to see you as? Stuff like that. What get at the interpersonal world connecting beliefs of the character, things that are really quite far removed from their character class, etc.
I'm going
Jay
to
Pizza Beats in the Twitch chat has.
go ahead.
Sorry, Shawn, go ahead.
I'm going to disagree with James just a bit.
This news delay, it's betraying
I know.
you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, disagree with me.
I'm going to disagree with James. I think those aren't bad. I think those are some things that the players should think about before they come to the table, about what their character is. The questions I want to ask at the table are, hey, Krusk, what did you do? How did Philibin save you? And how did you fail to repay Philibin for for that favor that he did for you? Because you want to make connections between the characters. That's where the drama lies. There is always internal drama for sure, but the internal drama in a lot of the games I've played and watched and seen tend to be Hamlet rather than the usual suspects. And when I'm playing a role-playing game, I want the usual suspects. I want that interaction, that grit. I don't want someone holding the skull saying, alas, poor Yorick. Because that disenfranchises, or at least cools down the other players while they have to sit back and watch that. I want that interaction happening. So I'm not saying James is wrong. I think those questions should happen. They just might want to happen sooner than when you sit down for your first session.
That's a great disagreement, and I would add on to that, saying grab a copy of the RPG Fiasco and keep that on hand.
I was about to rattle off, because I'm a sucker I'm in love with RPGs that as part of character creation or session 0, like as part of the whole sort of getting ready, there it is. It bakes in these questions: Fiasco, Kids on Bikes, Monster of the Week, it's Dread. You've got any number, even Alice is Missing to a degree. And what they do is they give you leading questions, which feels like such a no-no to be like, this is a truth of your character, but you get to figure out the details. But it is so good for creating interpersonal relationships, conflicts, loyalties. It is really good for the drama because like Shawn is saying, when everyone's a Hamlet, everyone's got their backstory, their secrets, there is kind of this weird drive. If your character has a dark backstory, you kind of want to keep that to yourself. That's the instinct. You're like, this is my secret past, so I won't tell anyone about it. And that does nothing for the story as it goes on. It's a totally understandable instinct. I do it all the time. But when you have something like, how did so and so betray you? How did Philibin betray Krusk? It means that you have this little edge waiting to come up. And I think actually Alice is Missing is a good example of it being something that really drives role play and story, where it'll tell you, you'll get a character card at the beginning that says something like, you jump to conclusions, you panic, and I mean, Alice is Missing is a very different kind of an example, doesn't necessarily apply to broader tabletop RPGs, but it gives you this little guiding thing that can inform later conversation. Someone else has a card that says you're trying to keep people calm. And so you end up with these weird little conflicts that come up out of that. It's just I love it. I love it so much. I pour through any game that has those kinds of questions and take everything I want from it and apply it to other games and make my own questions based off them. It's great. Oh, and I was going to say before, J Pizza Beats has a great question suggestion in the Twitch chat, which is I like asking my players what their characters' goals are and what they want to accomplish, which is very helpful for the DM.
Yeah, I think just very quickly, James, I'll let you jump in, but on that specific point about goals is that when I'm, starting any session, if it's a one shot, if it's a convention game or something like that, the questions I'll ask is, all right, describe your character. And why are they here? Why have they decided to go on this specific quest? Because then it helps couch the character in the quest that you're doing. It's particularly useful for one shots because you want them to go on the one shot. You don't want them to be like, I don't know why I'm here. I guess my character would do this because we're doing the one shot. It's like, why are you here? What are you getting out of this? Is it the payment? Is it the altruism? Is it the, X, Y, Z, whatever reason? Sorry, James, go ahead.
No worries. No, Dael, it's my turn to disagree with you in a kind and respectful way.
Oh, great.
And it's you say these questions, they do nothing for a character. I say no. I say they do something very important, but it is the slow burn. It's the long game. It's you can see these Hamletish qualities come out in like Critical Role characters because they are 100-episode affairs. You see them less often in, for example, Dimension 20 games because those are 10-episode affairs. Their character traits, they may have a hidden secret or two, but generally they wear their hearts on their sleeve a little bit more, unless it's a highly intrigued sort of Crown of Candy thing. But yes, if we're talking about one-shots, if we're talking about campaigns that we don't know if they'll last any more than 10 sessions, as many IRL campaigns actually are, then yeah, it's those sharp, fiasco-like intra-party connection creating questions that really create immediate fuel.
Yeah. That's a good disagreement as well. We're having good disagreements
very good
today
disagreements
because I suppose it does. It exposes where I am at in my, my current place in the world of D&D. We've seen on this podcast. I'm currently in my campaigns should be shorter arc of DMing. But also the interesting thing is, it's not a disagreement. It's just a thing that I thought of while you were talking. Critical Role is absolutely like the gold standard of how to have those, personal sort of dark secrets come out over the campaign and have like devastating reveals. But something that I've noticed with campaign 3 is that much, much sooner than usual, player characters just went, so what's your backstory? So what's your dark secret? Come on, let's get it all out there right now. And over the course of not very many episodes, they really did just hit a lot of the secret backstories. I feel like that is something I can relate to as kind of both a player and a DM recently, of just being like, let's just cut to the chase. We all want to know. We want to know each other's things. So let's just ask. I have in one of my, this is the campaign where I'm a player at the moment. And we rarely ever get to play, which is, again, part of why I'm like, forget the Hamlet. But one of the things that happened in that game, after a few sessions of us all dancing around each other's backstories, I was like, how can I just wrote out a list of prodding, poking questions I can ask each of the other characters to try to get some of that stuff out into the open so that it can actually start impacting relationships and story and all those things.
Yeah, we had a really rocky start to our most recent home campaign earlier in the year because there was a couple of reasons kind of going into it that I can talk about sort of in other contexts when it comes to world building and how you plan the start of a campaign and all that sort of jazz. But one of the problems that we found was that the player characters didn't know each other, didn't have a reason to trust each other, didn't have a reason to really work together, except that the contrivance that kind of kicked off the campaign, the event that brought them together has trapped them together in a way, which can be great, but it also meant that after that situation had sort of immediately resolved, wouldn't it be safer to go their separate ways and all split up rather than stick together? And it wasn't until we were sort of 4 or 5 sessions in, and we're using the Grim Hollow long rest rules, which mean that you need to rest. A long rest takes a couple of days to do. So they spent a day in a house, and I was like, well, you kind of can't really go anywhere or do anything extraneous because you're in a long rest, but you can interact with each other. You can do light downtime activities. And they all started to talk to each other in character and start to get to know each other's characters better. And it was almost like a new session 0. It was almost like the real start of the campaign, because now it felt like they were a party. And everybody said afterwards, they're like, wow, that was such a good session. That was so much better than where we were as a group immediately
so cool.
before that.
That's the dream.
And I found that the most successful start to a campaign we ever had was where everybody was part of a traveling circus, basically. And so everybody had a job in the circus, and everybody had pre-existing relationships in the circus. So everybody knew each other immediately at the start of the campaign. So there was, relational binds that kept everybody together and meant that everybody continued to work together.
I see myself trending in that direction. I think I'm becoming a very impatient DM in that I'm like, what's this campaign? It's a heist. Okay. We'll do fiasco relationships. And on top of that, I want to know, why do you need the money? Like, why are you here? There has to be a reason that you want to steal money. That's like, there are a million other ways to have a great sort of, crime group campaign, but I'm just like, come on, we got to get to the heart of it. You all want the money. Let's just accept it and move on.
I'm reading a fantasy novel by Leigh Bardugo called Crooked Kingdom right now, and it's a fantasy heist. Basically, it's a sequel. It's a sequel to a fantasy heist. It's also a fantasy heist. And one of the things they do in like chapter 2 is they get more or less the entire gang together, and in about 3 lines of dialogue, they've reiterated exactly why everyone needs this $1 million Kruger payout. And it's like, okay, great. And now we know. And, they do it with a little bit more subtlety in the first book, but it's such a great little streamlining because you're instantly on the same page, and you can do that in RPGs too.
Yeah. One quick little tidbit to go towards Andy's initial question about tying the player characters into the world as well, not just to each other. The one thing that I like to do to really affect how players think of their characters is to never describe their character as I am race times class. I am a elven rogue. I am a half-orc barbarian. Never describe your character in those terms, because then they don't feel like a character or a person. They feel like a game sprite, so to speak, right? And so I want the players to think about what your job is. We did this with the circus in particular, but it's kind of become the way that I like to think about role-playing games in general. Is like, think about what your character's job is. Are they a town guard? Are they are they a professional thief? Are they a horse tamer or like a horse shotter, shoe shotter, I think the term is? Are they, do they work in a tavern maybe? Whatever their job is, and then pick a class that kind of fits with that job. Pick a race if you want that kind of meshes with the class, if you want the mechanics, or just pick another race that you find interesting or exciting. But then just describe the physical attributes of your character as they're unique to you, rather than just saying, I'm an elf. Be like, all right, my ears are pointed, which means that I'm clearly elven in my heritage. I blah, 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 X, Y, Z kind of description. And it also leads to a lot less cliche, like I wear heavy armor and carry a shield and a sword and I am a knight. And that's fine if that's your character, but it leads to people saying, I carry my armor on my horse. You can see that it's beaten up. I'm clearly not high of rank, blah, 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 blah. I just think helps kind of put them in the game world a little bit more easily, rather than feeling like a sprite that they're dropping to be played with, so to speak.
Yeah.
Also, just quickly, Pedantic Steve, I love the question that they put in the Twitch chat, which was ask your character if they had a bad dream, what it would be about, because I think that just tells so much about a character. Sorry, Shawn, go ahead.
This actually goes back to our first question. How do you unlock the characters and give them hooks to embed them in the world? If you have 6 characters in your campaign, figure out what are the 6 most important things, pieces of exposition that you want to know about the world, and tie one of those characters to each of those 6 things and give them some information that they can then associate themselves with and deliver to the other characters in a way that is not you becoming the exposition. So if one of the most important things in your world is there was this great devastation on this one continent and there were only a few survivors. Well, one of those characters better be one of those survivors. And you can give them the story and they can tell that story to the other players throughout play rather than you delivering it all as the game master.
I love that. I love that. Also, it made me think of something I've enjoyed making my players squirm with. And I think I do it because in one of my first, I think it was like my first or second ever game that I played in, the GM sort of just said it was Pathfinder, it was Curse of the Crimson Throne. And he gave us a booklet to begin with that had a bunch of NPCs from around the city. And he said, pick 2 of these NPCs for your character to be connected with and explain their link with you in the backstory. But the way that it played out and the way that I like to make it play out in my games is to make sure that there is someone within the setting that within an area that the players might encounter them, that the player doesn't want to see. Here's a character that for whatever reason you don't want to run into, you don't want to have a conversation with, and then put them in a situation where they have to do that thing. I think that is great for pulling out backstory of the Hamlet variety. My example was like, my character was like, seemed like a street rat, but actually she'd been raised by the church, and the head cleric there was really good. It was like a genuinely good father figure to her, but she just had I don't want, I can do it on my own. And so it was like this really embarrassing reveal that she actually had kind of a loving pseudo family backing her up, and they were really nice, and she just did not want the rest of the party to know about that. And that was such a great moment as a player to have that interaction.
I also like that as a flip of the script. Like, I'm a tragic background. I have no family. And it's like, no, you do. You just, it reminds me of a Tim Minchin song. Tim Minchin, if you've never heard of him, I'm not sure how famous he is overseas, but he's an Australian comedian who writes this song called Rock and Roll Nerd about being like a middle-class white dude who doesn't really have any problems to like rock out about. And so making up problems so that he can pretend to be a rock and roll star. It's very funny. That is, I think, overtime for today. I kind of have to guess now because we start recording a little bit beforehand for the Twitch stream. Speaking of which, if you want to join us on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/ghostfire_official at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, and 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Standard Time at the moment. So feel free to join us there. If you want to ask us a question, you can do so in the Twitch chat, or you can email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, and we will get to your questions as we run through them. Please send more questions. We love answering them. I'm just going to speak for everybody there. We love answering them. My name has been Ben Byrne, here as always with Shawn Merwin, James Haeck, Dael Kingsmill, and we will catch you all again next week. It's giving Dante a little bit of a lead there, and Dael as well.